Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Rachel, to our live Connected Yoga Teacher podcast day. How are you doing today?
Oh, good. Thanks for having me on. No, I'm great. It's sunny. It's beautiful out. Things are good. Thanks for asking.
Yay. First of all, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor of our live show, which is Offering Tree. Offering Tree is an amazing company. If you are thinking about how can I get my yoga classes online and integrate Zoom and charge for things? How can I put a course online? How can I email my students, especially if the tech is overwhelming? And we're going to talk about all of that today as well with Rachel.
Yes.
Some of you have sent in questions, but if you're here live, say a hello in the comments. If you're here for the replay, also say hello. We'll come back and check the comments. Tell us, how's the sound right now? How are you today? What questions do you have about courses? And let's dive right in after one more thing. If you are going to use Offering Tree or if you want to check it out, a couple of things to note. You can go to their website and you can click on a button to actually book a call with their team and see, is this a good fit? Will they answer some questions of mine? And also, I have a coupon code for you. So it's also nice to save some money. So if you use the coupon code offeringtree.com/Shannon, you can save yourself some money as well. All right, so let's get into this, Rachel. First of all,
Right.
Looking at your bio, you actually specialize in getting online courses going and in leading teacher training. So what got you into this work?
That is such a great question. So I, like many of us out there, love yoga, love education, loved being in the teacher training room, and just it was like the best place in the world. And so as I started to pursue that path, I became the director of Teachers College for Y Yoga up in Vancouver, which was a 12 studio business, and they were developing their teacher training. And so I dove in. And again, many of you out there can relate to this. I was like, oh my God, I was like so nervous, but so excited because it was exactly what I wanted to do. Created this 200-hour and then spent like the next 4 years revising it. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then I took a couple of online courses. This was in the beginning when online courses were, they were kind of out there, but not like they are now. And I took a couple with my favorite teachers, like teachers that I know are amazing educators and they're just have so much to offer. But I really struggled with their online courses. And I was like, these are amazing teachers, but what they're offering isn't translating into approachable, easy to understand education, which is a lot of times what can happen when you are trying to transfer an in-person experience to something that's online. And I thought, there's got to be a better way to do this. Like, why have I spent like so much time revising? And then also, why are these courses not up to what they could be? And so I decided to go back to school and earned my my master's of science in instructional systems and learning technologies, which is such a mouthful. But basically, it's like, how do we create great education across, online, in person, all of that? What do we need to be thinking about? And then also, how do we use technology, or how does that, translate into being online? And what are the special factors we need to consider? So I did that. And I love that I earned a master's of science because I'm the least, like, math and I are not friends. So I think it's hilarious that I have a master's of science. so funny to me. Like, oh, that looks good. Like, no, but it was a really great program. And then I leveraged that and loved my work with Y Yoga, but left running that so that I could then kind of extend more of this information out into the world and help people be a bridge between being experts and being educators, because it's a slightly different thing. So that's how I got into it.
That's really cool. And so I also want to give a shout out to some people who are here live. Sometimes it doesn't tell us your names, but the sound is good. And someone's already saying that they love your courses. And
Yay.
Mary is here from Columbus, Ohio. Hi from Victoria, BC. So Rachel, did you live in British Columbia then?
Yes. Yeah. For 14 years. So I lived in New York City for 10 years, just enough to get like the stuffing beat out of me Basically, it's great. I love New York. No, I absolutely love New York. It's great. And then I moved to Vancouver, Canada. Very different feeling. Very cool city, but very different. And so I was up there for 14 years. And now, right now, I'm in Colorado Springs, Colorado, because my partner, Gil Headley, is creating a massive anatomy project. It's this amazing thing that I've been helping to kind of midwife, if you might, through the instructional design stuff that I do and his skills. So I'm in Colorado. So I've been kind of all over the place.
That's really exciting. And I know that we have you both on the schedule, I think back in September. So we'll talk more about that definitely.
Yes. Yeah.
Denite's here, and Denite says, so excited for this live. And one person is saying, good evening from PH. Help
the
me out.
Philippines?
Oh, maybe. Nice. Well, good evening. Okay, let's dive right into some questions. So I think today we're going to focus on online courses because that's what our teachers have a lot of questions. And what do you think is the biggest difference from in-person to online? And is there anything where you're like, oh, I wish yoga teachers knew this before they started their course online?
Yeah. Yes. The biggest difference, of course, as you guys know, is feedback. You know, it's like we're not in the room with the people, so we can't look around and go like, oh, Timothy's having trouble with this concept. You know, see the faces. Like yoga teachers, generally speaking, are really good at picking up body cues and body language and seeing what's going on, and also being organic and going with the flow, right? So that when we're in person, we can, you know, we might have something we want to do, but then we can adapt based on what's going on in the moment. And when you're online, depending on how you do it, that is not such an option. So for online, we have to become very strategic about how we give out the information. And what's the most important thing? Well, I have two big things that I would offer to everyone out there, which is one, is there's something that I call the great mistake. And this is a very well-intentioned thing that I certainly did for years when I was creating education, which is that we think that teaching someone is about telling them what we know, right? That seems like, well, of course, you're telling them what you know, right? But it's actually when we start to think, yeah, the great mistake. But when we change from thinking like an expert to thinking like an educator, we actually need to change that. Rather than thinking that teaching is about giving you what I know, instead I'm going to think about the process of learning is what can my student do that they couldn't do before? So I change it around and I put the emphasis on the student. What can my students do? Whether that's like demonstrate something, describe something, or you know, describe their attitudes about something, but what can they do that they could not do before this time? And as soon as I do that, as soon as I change it to something that's about my students performing differently, then all of a sudden it really helps us all to clarify the purpose of our course and what we really need to focus on. Because to point number two, so, you know, we really need to structure ourselves in a way that we don't when we're in person and a little bit more organic. So when you're online, structure becomes hugely important, and being super, super clear about those learning objectives. Learning objectives are describing what do I want my students to be able to do as a result of this training or this time. When we're clear about our learning objectives, it actually, interestingly enough, it helps us to structure everything, and it also helps us to simplify things. Structure is very important. Yeah, and it's actually, you know, once we start putting on our hat and we kind of change it around to think like, okay, this is about the student's performance, it starts to make our job a little bit easier and simpler.
Okay, so I feel like I really understand when we make it about the student. I'm thinking of a great example of like, let's say you're leading a restorative yoga teacher training.
Yeah.
It makes sense that you want your students to be able to lead bodies into restorative yoga poses. What about the structure? Can you kind of take an example in that restorative teacher training and give us an example of that?
Sure. So from an instructional design perspective, what we think about are, we call them learning objectives. And the learning objective is just a really pithy description of what I want my students to be able to do. So in this restorative training, you might be thinking, okay, like take a brainstorm, you know, over the course of this program or this workshop, I want my students to be able to, at the end, I want them to be able to, let's say, lead a group class safely through 4 restorative poses, using props, offering adaptations, and controlling the class environment effectively, right? So that would be, hey, big picture, this is what I want people to come out with. But you'll notice that all those parts of that learning objective were something that is demonstrable. In other words, I didn't say students are going to know how to teach a restorative class. I said students are going to be able to lead a class effectively using props, maybe hands-on assist, whatever those elements are that you need to see from people. So what we do is we start off with the big goal for the course. This is my big idea. This is what I want them to be able to do. And then I start to think and break that down into the topics. So in this restorative example, say I want them to be able to obviously teach the poses safely with adaptations. So one thing I need to focus on is, oh, hey, teaching the poses with adaptations safely. Great. So that might be one of my topics. Another thing is the use of props that I said I want them to be able to use props effectively. So that might be topic 2, props. And then topic 3 would be something like, say, I want to be able to do safe and, nurturing hands-on assist. Maybe that's hands-on assist for restorative. And maybe another one is classroom environment for restorative. So I'm breaking it down into those elements. I'm like, so what do they need to know? What are the littler pieces that they need to know to reach that big objective? And so then what I have is I have my topics clearly laid out. And then it's like great rabbit hole times. And I have a course map sheet that, can kind of help people out with this sort of thing, right? This is what we do. But for each of those topics, then I say, okay, so what are my little baby learning objectives that help to feed that big learning objective? So let's just take the example of props. Maybe it's like restorative teachers need to be able to identify appropriate props for use in a restorative class. They need to be able to demonstrate the use of a bolster in 3 different restorative poses. They need to be able to describe the importance of creating, adaptive practices for different kinds of bodies. And so with those learning objectives, like I got my topic and now I've got my little baby learning objectives, I can go like, oh, now I know what kind of activities I need to do, maybe what kind of lecture I need to do, what kind of video I might need to create of a demonstration of the props in order that students understand and can get to those learning objectives clearly. So it's like a little outline. Got my big goal, I have my topics, and each of my topics has little goals that help support the big goal. So it's
good. This is so good. Do you think that's where we should be starting when we're thinking about starting a course, or is there a step before that?
I think that I value brainstorming, right? So I think, the first thing you might want to do is, go for a walk, pie in the sky, blue sky it, write down all your ideas. I think that can be super valuable just for getting that out there. But then from that's when the structure really comes in. And this is what's so important and will save you so much time and revision work later. And is to actually map it out super specifically first. Because once you've mapped it out, then you can see like, oh, hey, are there gaps? And also, am I giving too much information? If this is my goal, the restorative thing, and I want to talk about yin because I think it's cool, I might realize that, oh, hey, yin doesn't actually fit. That's a different course. Like yin may not fit into there. And so the thing about online courses is that simplicity is important. And when we love our topic, sometimes we can overcomplicate things or we can give too much information, which again comes from a great place, but might derail the clarity of the experience you're trying to create. So mapping out, and also just pragmatically, then that helps you, optimize your time. Like when you look at your course map and you go, oh, hey, I've got 6 videos to create. Wonderful. Rather than just trying to create it as you go, you're like, no, I have a video day. I'm going to do my 6 videos then, and then they're in the can. So you can save a lot of time and effort by creating a really clear map before you start.
This is so good. One of the comments here is just like planning a yoga class. It's so true. We can really want to pile everything in and just think, well, the more I put in, the better experience is going to be. And we know as yoga teachers, that's actually not true. It's almost the opposite. Like the more we can take out and simplify it. Someone else is saying, very useful thought process. So fun too. Denite is saying, I love this idea of thinking like an educator instead of an expert. Great mindset shift. And someone else is just saying student-centered teaching over teacher domination. I think that's amazing. So, okay. Now, I'm wondering where I should go with the questions next because some people sent in some great questions.
Okay.
I think we'll skip to this one now because you talked about
Mm,
objectives and like those topics. So how many objectives should you have in a course? I heard you talk about the big one. So we have one big, like by the end of this training or this course, these
yeah,
students will be able to do this thing. So it's one big one. And then what about how do we know how
sure.
many we fit
Yeah.
in?
I know you want to put so many in, right? Well, and it also depends on how big I mean, it actually doesn't really. So, what I would say is that at the very top level, I'm actually going to give you two little levels for the top. So, the top level will be, what's the one thing you want students to remember in 2 years? So, if I'm thinking big idea, it's like, okay, what's the big idea? And then for the course level learning objectives, like, okay, for the whole program, you probably want 5. So, that isn't that there's not a lot of information in there. They just need to be big enough buckets for you. Like students will be able to sequence a restorative class. Students will be able to cue effectively to create a restorative teaching environment. Students will be able to lead a restorative program using blah, blah, blah. So you want 5 of those. Then for each of your little mini topics, right? So you got your 5 big ones. Then for each of your mini topics, you also want like 3 to 5. And it'll depend on how much content you have in there, but that's usually a good way to break it down. If it's more than that, you're getting too in the weeds, getting a little too detailed. And if there's less than that, then it might be a little too general. So generally we say, like around 5 learning objectives is kind of a sweet spot. And one thing that you may want to think about, which is something that sometimes we forget as teachers, is to think about what the prior knowledge is for your course. Right. So this is something we sometimes take for granted. Like who do I expect to be taking this course? And then what do I need them to know? Like, do they need to know the Sanskrit names of poses? Do they need to know certain asana? Like what kind of literacy do they need? Do I expect them to have walking in? Because sometimes when we are experts and teachers and things like that, we can assume people know things that they might not know. Depending on the 200-hour teacher training that someone's gone to, they might have a really kind of different, set of knowledge and skills than someone else. So that's kind of just like an additional little tip as you're creating your course, is to think, okay, what are my expectations about what people already know?
Okay, this is so good. I love your clear answer of like what the objectives. And you started to say like when we get in the weeds. So I would say this comes up all the time when people start thinking about putting a course together, and me included, the overwhelm kicks in. It can be like we start veering towards the tech or like, oh my gosh, what are all the topics? How would I convey this? All of
Yep.
these questions start flowing in. Do you have some tips around when it gets overwhelming? What do we do?
That is a really good question. And I think that's why the course map can be so helpful. So if we start, I always like to come back to the blue sky and to the big intention. Like in 2 years, what I want them to remember, like what's the most important thing? And that can really help us stay oriented towards, what our mission is and what we want to share when we start drilling down. And I think that for me, the course map is also super helpful because when you start with your learning objectives, and you're like, okay, this is what I'm focusing on, then you can start to see like, oh my gosh, I'm totally going down a rabbit hole into polyvagal theory. Wait, come back. Like that's, and to give yourself permission to be simple and to also know that, you can create more than one course, right? And so if I start with my map, if I start with my learning objectives will absolutely dictate my topic. So in the restorative example, it's like, okay, I need to cover props, I need to cover cueing, I need to cover classroom elements, right? And then it's a little easier, like rather than getting ahead of ourselves and thinking like, I got to figure out all the activities. It's like, no, take one topic at a time, map out, okay, in my topic, what activities am I going to do? Keep it simple. And then how am I going to assess them? And we'll talk about that in a sec. But I think basically the course map is like your lifeline. It'll help keep you it'll give you a roadmap through the forest when we start to get a little bit lost.
Oh, that's so good. All right. So to go along with this, like getting into the nitty-gritty details,
Yeah.
someone's asking, how long should videos be for each section? And I love this because I feel like our attention span isn't as great online. Am I right?
Yeah, you are so right. And this is an excellent question. And the answer may surprise you. So best practice when I was working for universities to help them with, creating their online courses, 6 minutes. Okay, but here's the thing is like, it's not like if you're doing a practice, obviously yoga is a little different. If you're doing an experiential practice, of course, you could do an hour-long class, you could do a 20-minute class, but when you're giving information, the idea is that I give a lecture, right? Or I lecture on a piece of information, a chunk of content, and then I'm going to have the students apply it to something, right? Because I want them to own it. And then I'm going to quiz them on it and make sure they get it. So you take each little chunk at a time. You could have you could have 6 videos, but make them small little bite-sized pieces that are easy to digest. Also, keep in mind that your students, this is another big difference, Shannon. You were asking about the difference between online and in person. When we're in person, we have people in a room for 6 hours, 8 hours with us, right? When they're online, they've got like a kid on their hip, a coffee in their hands. They're like, trying to find their clothes. They're going to work. They're answering their phone. They are busy. So 6 minutes, they can if they see an hour-long video, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, right? That's like intense. But if they see a 6-minute video, they can take that chunk and they can really absorb it. So that's another big difference, is that we can't capture our students' attention. We can't own their attention in a way we could do in a live experience, at least when we're talking about pre-recorded content.
This is a great question. I'm so glad someone asked, and I'm listening and I'm telling myself this because I like to put a big chunk of video out there. So 6 minutes, let's aim for that. When you were talking about, okay, we can talk about the thing for 6 minutes and then maybe they go and do that experience. What's that saying of like, teach it, but there's like 3
do it,
things.
learn it. Yeah. Or learn it, learn it, do it, teach it.
Yeah.
Like they say, you learn it, then you do it once, and then you teach it to someone else. Yeah. It's such a good thing. So again, this comes back to thinking like an educator rather than like an expert. So if I'm thinking like an expert, I'm thinking I'm just going to tell you and you're going to get it. But when I think like an educator, I think, okay, I might give you this information, but then I need to see your performance. You need to do a task that's going to ask you to use this skill or this knowledge and put it into practice in as practical a way as possible. So, you might have somebody say like, okay, now that you've watched this video on, bolsters, okay, go and here's your assignment for each of these poses. I want you to do a bolster setup that would be adaptive for these reasons, right? Or like, show me that and then lay on it, take a picture, and let's have your assessment. So it's a way of putting into practice the kind of the cognitive stuff, especially as yoga teachers, right? Because a lot of our stuff is really about skills that we do. So we want to give students activities that makes them do it. So it doesn't just stay up here where honestly they'll forget it if they're not doing it, and instead move it into the realm that's really active, right? And practical.
Okay, that's so helpful. Someone else asked a question about assessment. What type of assessment is effective to know? I just want to say I'm really bad at this. Like I like to just boom, 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 throw the information at people. And I don't really give time for this assessment part of like, are people absorbing this? Did they get it? And what happens then, and I'll speak personally, is at the end of something, someone asks a question. I'm like, oh no, we didn't hit all the points.
Yeah. This is super, super common. And this is so important for online because, and I'll just say too, that there's 2 different ways you can run your online courses. You can be very involved or you can be more passive. Now, being involved means that maybe the students are reaching out to you for assessments. Maybe you're having a live Zoom call to go along with the content that you're doing. Maybe, so you're more involved with what they're doing and then you're giving them more direct feedback. Now, if it's a passive course, which is where people do it anytime, they don't necessarily connect with you, they're self-motivated and they can just kind of go through it. If you're doing that, then you want to make sure that your assessments are really clear and usually it's like a multiple choice thing. Like if you're using a platform, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, usually they have the capacity to do multiple choice tests, which can help people reflect on their knowledge. But if you're not involved, you're not going to be able to do what I'd call higher level assessments, which is like giving somebody feedback, let's say about like a video of a class that they taught in the restorative style or the pictures of them doing the setup, right? So if you're not there to do that, you have to be very strategic about how you do assessments. to make sure people are getting what you want. And so that's kind of a huge topic, but I just want to mention it because people run their courses different ways. They can do it like more hands-on, or some people do hands-off. Now, in terms of assessments, the kind of assessment that you're going to give your students, this is great, is totally dependent on your learning objectives. So if you go back to your course map and you're like, students are going to be able to create a warm, welcoming class environment that's appropriate for a restorative class and like down training the nervous system. Well, then one of your assessment points will be, I want to see a picture or a setup of a student creating their class environment for that setup, right? So the learning objectives dictate the assessments, right? So if I look at my learning objectives, I need to make sure that I'm testing to those things exactly, because it's setting expectations. And when we give our learning objectives, if we give them to the students at the beginning of the course and they go, oh, I know where I'm supposed to get to, right? And that helps them to focus what they're doing during the process of learning, to really pick up what you want them to. So you do want to give those learning objectives at the beginning, and then I want to test them on those learning objectives at the end. It wouldn't be fair for me to have an assessment which was like, okay, like teach a hatha class, if my learning objectives are all about restorative. And I know that seems obvious, but actually the learning objectives set you up for success in terms of knowing what you need to test for at the end. So, students need to name 5 benefits of the restorative yoga practice. Well, one of your assessments is going to be, they're going to take a quiz or some sort of something where they outline the benefits of the restorative yoga practice. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And it just comes back to the map. It's like that map of where are we all going. When we set that map up, we just come back to it. I'm hearing today, like every time we hit that overwhelm or every time we hit a question, we just come back to, what did I want? Where do I want these students to be at the end? That's great.
Yeah. And
there's someone sending you a hug.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it was helpful. And there's a follow-up question. Do you ever use pre-assessments to gauge prior knowledge? If so, what do they look like?
Great. They can look, yeah, that's a great idea. Because we talked about that, knowing where everyone's at is important when they come in. I mean, and again, it depends. Like, it also depends on your time and how much you want to get involved in it. You could do a pre-interview. They could take an online quiz. Like, you could do a Google form quiz and just have people, fill out what they know, to test them for their prior knowledge. So, depending on how involved you want to be, I think interview or like an online quiz would probably fit the bill. But if you need to see people demonstrate stuff, you're like, I need to see them demonstrate their cueing or something like that, then you might need a video submission, right? So it sort of depends on what prior knowledge you need to see as the educator of your course.
Right. Okay. This is so helpful. Also, for those of you wanting to submit questions, go for it, because I think I'm getting to the end of like the ones I had written down. I can think of endless questions. Like, I could sit here all day and do it, but, and also share your name when it pops up and it says Facebook user. Sometimes this just happens. It's nice to give you a shout out when you have such great questions. Yeah. One person is asking, like, how do we do this? This is run through StreamYard. So StreamYard is pushing this out to YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, go subscribe to it. And also to our Facebook group. And it's all done through StreamYard, and I just have to click buttons. I don't know how it works, but it does.
Magic.
So someone said, grateful for the direct answer. Thank you so much. All right, let's get into talking about the tech side of things. So I think this is a lot of the time, the overwhelm, but also, and tell me if you think you see this, Rachel, I hear people say, I want to put together an online course, and then they jump right to tech.
Right.
Like, they're not even looking at what's the objective, where, blah, 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 all of that map.
Yeah.
We as humans, I think, tend to just think, what technology will make this be an amazing course?
Yeah. Well, and we also get scared because if we don't know the platforms, and that can feel like the point of anxiety, right? So I think sometimes, at least for me, I was so freaked out about the platforms when I first started creating online courses. It was like, that felt like I was like, I know the content, but the platform, I don't know. So let me just put everyone's mind at ease and say, education is not about the tech. So if we think back to correspondence courses, people have been doing distance learning for years. It's just they used to do it through letters in the Pony Express, right? So regardless of whether or not you're doing an in-person program, an online program, or correspondence via the post, the educational principles remain the same. Learning objectives, breaking it down into topics, being super clear and having those learning objectives fulfill the top ones, assessing to the learning objectives. This kind of structure works regardless of the tech you're using. And so at the very, so let's kind of go through some of them just so you kind of know some of the options that are out there that are common. So kind of at the low tech end of the spectrum, you could put a great course together just through email. Yes, you could still do that. You could, use your MailChimp account or whatever, send out an email once a week with, an embedded video from YouTube that includes your lectures, PDFs with worksheets and handout, and an online quiz. You could just put that together on your own, right? So, if you're like, I'm freaked out, but I know how to do email, there's options for that. Now, in the middle here, what we have is like, are the platforms that are out there, which are basically like glorified websites that have been adapted to be really user-friendly for coursification. Those are your platforms like Thinkific. I use Thinkific, that's mine. But Thinkific and Teachable are like little baby twins that live in different countries. They're very similar. So Teachable, Thinkific, we have Kajabi, and then you have other options, which kind of course share with you where you put your course on their platform. I think it's like Udemy, and there's like some like that where they will host your course for you. And so within this platform, the first thing you're deciding from kind of an entrepreneurial perspective is, do I want to have my courses on my platform, my website, my kind of like in my space, or do I want to put them out there? Usually my preference for people is that they hold their own content. I think it's because I think that's more about building your own business and building your own tribe and having people find you. Putting them somewhere else where it's shared, that's cool for marketing purposes or maybe reaching a new network of people. But usually I say, like, as yoga teachers and professional, I feel like we want to hold our stuff closer to home. That's just my personal preference. But so we have these kinds of platforms in the middle. Kajabi, I think I mentioned, is in there as well. And then it kind of like, and these as a whole tend to be pretty user-friendly. They all take some getting used to. I'm gonna lie, you got to get in there. You got to figure out where do I put my videos? How do I upload my videos? What size of my videos need to be? How do I do the courses? Yada, yada, yada. So there's a little bit of learning, but they tend to be pretty user-friendly. And then way over here, and I can dive into these more, but way over here, kind of at the higher end, would be a custom job. You hire someone to like create a platform for you, right? So, I tend not to, that tends to be pretty pricey. These guys in the middle tend to be, depending on what you're doing with them, probably $1,000 a year, probably something like that. Usually they have price points about $80 a month. Some of them have a little bit lower depending on how many courses you're doing, whatever. And then of course, this is the low cost version. Hey, I just use my current MailChimp account and I can create something that's of value and like drip it once per week, right? So in big buckets, those are the options.
Those are really good. I love that you started at the email because someone did ask, like, is there a free or low cost platform? And that would be that email one.
Yeah.
I feel like I didn't think of this.
And one thing you can do is use something like Offering Tree, right? So Offering Tree and these other platforms are starting to catch up too, where it would be more rudimentary. There's more sophistication sometimes in these other platforms. But where you can have like a series of videos available and a link to lecture notes and a link to other things and a link to maybe an online quiz that could be hosted by Google or one of those other places that does that sort of thing. So you might be able to coursify something that you already have. Now, if you want to get a little bit more complex, but honestly, like good learning is pretty simple. Again, if we think of the Pony Express, like you can get a lot of mileage out of something which isn't like snazzy. Great tech is not going to make something better learning. It's really about the integrity of the map, and that's really on point.
That's so good. I'm throwing up here, in case you just jumped in now, I'm throwing up here the discount code for Offering Tree. You can use it if you'd like to save some money. I'm actually just putting a course. It's like a workshop that we're putting on Offering Tree,
Yeah.
and I'm excited about it to see how it works. I was using Member Vault for a while, and then they just threw this thing at me where it was like, you can only have 2 courses on there now. And now I'm scrambling to kind of move things over. And I've also used Thinkific. I'm a fellow Thinkific user. And I would say, like, do your research on it for sure. Ask other people what they use. And I love what you said, that this isn't what makes the learning. It can make the difference for you as the course creator and your people showing up, but it's still not impacting the learning. Something I just also learned this week, thanks to Kelly Christian, hosted on Amanda Mckinney's in Amanda Mckinney's marketing group, is that some of the platforms don't translate accounting wise. Kajabi is one of them that can make it really difficult. So you might be thinking, oh gosh, I just want people to sign up. Why am I thinking, like, what happens when 100 people sign up? Well, you want things automated and you want the accounting to work well. So this is good.
One thing that Thinkific and Teachable, neither of them do yet, is to account for tax. So like for me, resident in Canada, but I sell to people all over the world, I have to charge tax in Canada, but not to anybody else. So, and it doesn't change the tax by like the province. Whereas something like WooCommerce, if you have, they're more robust. That's like just a kind of like a shopping cart thing that some people use. They will. So you can use, now there's lots of like crossovers, people are improving these things all the time. But there's like zaps that you can use or things like that to get different things to talk to each other, or add-ons you could purchase to make up for that. But that's a great point. Because the benefit of using one of these guys as opposed to doing email is that it takes payments. So you just need to be a little bit savvy about, like, what I do is I just say people have to give me the province they live in when they sign up. But then I still have to manually at the end of the year figure out, like, okay, what kind of tax do I owe? Or, so, and it's shocking that Kajabi doesn't have better reporting, because they're a super high end version of these guys. And just to point out for all of you out there who might be kind of platform shopping, Kajabi's big sales pitch is that they do marketing and email funneling, and they're kind of like an all-in-one shop. So, when I use Thinkific, but I also have a separate email provider. Thinkific isn't great for email broadcasts or anything like that. Whereas Kajabi is like, does all those sales funnels, and, you can dive down a rabbit hole with them in terms of different offers and bundles and stuff. So, but yeah, it's really surprising to take a look at some of those reporting functionalities and be like, what? Aren't these better?
Yeah. We either have an article already out or it's about to go out comparing all of the platforms. I will look for it and grab it if it's already up, because our yoga teachers were asking this question and we thought, let's compile it with their feedback. So we've done that. I'm sure I can grab the link for it. So I will do that. And I would say, like, don't get too caught up in that. Like that is not going to make your course be effective and amazing. All right. So let's get into some other questions here. Yeah. So here's one. What's the biggest mistake you see with online courses? Maybe something you haven't already shared. And this is from Brianne.
Yeah. Let me think. Something I haven't. Well, okay. Well, I have some tips. I wouldn't say if I were going to just kind of review big mistakes, it would be putting too much information in, not giving assessments for what you're actually testing, and not giving doable real life activities for what you want people to do. The more real life the application of the activities and the stuff in your course, the better students are going to be able to take it away and to learn it. But I will give you a tip, and this isn't necessarily a huge mistake, but I think this is something that's super low-hanging fruit that we can do when we're building our courses that makes them a lot more professional and easy to follow. And what that is for every topic you do, so when you're actually putting it into your platform, at the beginning of every topic chapter, I think it's really important to have either some text or a video saying, in this module, this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how you can use props in the restorative practice, right? It's super simple, but you're introducing and giving an overview of the topic that's going to be covered so you can help orient your students to what they're learning. And then at the end of each topic, whether it's written or whether it's a little video of you saying hi, to say, in this module, this is what you learned. You learned the different types of props, you learned how to use them for different practices in restorative, you learned the benefits of props, whatever. This is what you learned. In our next module, now we're going to cover this. So it's a way of giving, it's like sharing your map with your students. It's a way of kind of previewing what you're going to talk about. Then you talk about it and then you review it. And by doing that and being consistent, right, with the preview and the review, you really help your students kind of go like, right, this is the essence of what I'm trying to learn. And since we're not there in person to be so emphatic about these key points, I think that's, again, it's super easy to do. It's a simple thing, but it really helps to make a difference in how people can navigate the information you're giving them.
I think that's also great for like a comfort level of, okay, I know where we're going. I know what we're going to cover next. Personally, as a student, I get a lot of comfort from that.
Yeah, me too. You're like, I know the teacher knows what they're doing, right? There's a plan, and it kind of goes, especially for, type A people who like need to know what's happening. It can be really helpful in just getting everybody feeling exactly comfortable and safe and like, I'm in good hands. Okay, good.
This is a really great long question, so it might block us out for a moment here. What are some effective ways to engage your students in an online program so that they see results? I'm transitioning from one-on-one and creating a program that still has a lot of one-on-one components. One of my most important values is getting my clients results, which is easier when I'm providing a service one-on-one because I can help them to do the work. How do you create that same momentum and progress in an online program?
Right. That's a good question. And I think that comes down to how you're leveraging the online experience. So if your program is very personalized and geared towards a one-on-one experience, then you want to be savvy about like, okay, what can they do on their own? And then what do I need to be present for? So like in that case, that would be one of those courses, which is more interactive. And frankly, guys, just, without any filters, I think this is a better learning experience. You being involved in the course, you being present to your students, having a weekly meet or something like that, or having those assessment points where you connect with them, that's going to make for a better learning experience generally than just taking some multiple choice quizzes, in my opinion. But for this one-on-one course, what you might consider is like, okay, I'm putting online, first of all, those pieces or of information that students are going to want to refer back to. Because the wonderful thing about an online course is that students can watch the lectures more slowly. They can watch the demonstrations more slowly. They can go back and rewatch. So that's really one of the benefits of online that we want to take advantage of. So in your situation, I would say put online, those topics again with your course map, those things that are really good content information for them to take that is universal and consistent. And then complement that, of course, it sounds like exactly what you're planning. You complement that with still one-on-one meetings. It's just you don't have to give them everything in those one-on-one meetings because they can do pre-work to be prepared and know the concepts or skills that you kind of want to reinforce when you meet them one-on-one. Another thing that you can use with online for one-on-one stuff is video submissions. So we have synchronous learning, which means we're same time, just like this podcast, right? Synchronous, but then asynchronous is people can watch it later, right? They can watch it anytime. So in your situation with one-on-one stuff, if you want to give students the freedom to not have to book a time-bound appointment with you, you might have them do video submissions and then you give them feedback back, depending on what the skills are. And then for, if you want to really give them just-in-time feedback, if you want to give them immediate feedback, then you would arrange to have a personal meet. So, but one of the things that you brought up, which I think is so important, is an idea of motivation. So maybe, could we talk about that for a second, Shannon?
Yes, let's please do that.
Right. So y'all probably know, it's just like me when I took my course with my teacher who I loved. And I was like, I love my teacher, but this is terrible. I don't want to finish it. I was like, oh, right. So it's like, how do we keep our students motivated? Because online courses have a huge attrition rate. So ways that you can keep students motivated is to really give them, first of all, they need to be really related to what they're doing. It needs to solve an immediate problem for the students. That's why I encourage you to do exercises which are really real life. Like rather, like if I'm doing a sequencing course, I'm going to say, I want you to build, like, go ahead and create the next class, rather than say like, oh, tell me why sequencing is so great. It's like, no, build out your class according to the principles we've just done. Because they're like, I have a class, I can go teach this to my students. We just really want it to be something that's really real life, because adult learners, we don't have time to do stuff that doesn't directly impact kind of something we need to know right now often, right? It sticks a little bit more and gives us motivation when we have real life applications to the stuff that we're learning. In yoga, oftentimes we do, because if we're teachers and we're taking that restorative course, there's a reason we want to learn restorative, because we want to go teach it. But make your activities like really applicable to the skills that they're learning in a practical way. Another way, let's see. So relevance. So I'm just thinking through my head of this like awesome, there's an awesome system for creating motivation. And one of those things is relevance. So it's like real world application. Another thing is that we want to give the students satisfaction in what they're learning. So that means we don't want to create outrageous goals for them. I'm not going to, create a course which is beyond their capacities. It's one of the reasons we have those 6-minute videos. It's like, we want them to be able to do those bite-sized chunks, learn something, and then get the feedback of like, oh, I was able to apply that and I got it right. That's great. That's why those quizzes can be really good too. Just not even so much to test people, but actually to give them the feedback of, oh, I'm on the right track, because that feels really good to us as learners. So, relevance and satisfaction are super important with our learners. And then also feeling free to throw in like making it personal. So when you're creating an online course, to add little bits of things that are not too much. We don't want to add like extraneous information, but it's useful to, do things that grab people's attention, telling personal stories about why this information has been relevant for you, or sharing a little bit of your journey can also be really, really a great way to keep students in the mix of it. One of the things that I like to do is I like to put students into cohorts. So this comes down to a question of whether or not your course is going to start at a certain time and end at a certain time, or whether people can take it anytime. So I used to create my courses. I was like, I want to make them available anytime. Students can come and take them whenever. That'll make it so much more accessible. It turns out that actually hasn't been as effective as having a course that starts at a specific date. One, because students get excited about something that is time bound and limited. And also because when I start students at a certain date, I can pair them together. So having an opportunity to connect with peers in the course can be super satisfying and motivating. You put them into partners or groups of 4, and they can connect throughout the course. People get super excited about that. So that's another way you can keep them motivated, is to create opportunities to connect with both you and their other students.
I am so glad that Denite asked this question. She said, I forgot to put my name in there. This is so good. Like this, you saying like, okay, no filters, it's just better live. Brienne was saying the live component is so helpful. Speaking from experience as a student, it's true. Those quick wins are nice, and having that accountability of the group. I agree. And I think there's this myth out there as well in the online world. Like you'll create this online course and then you'll just sleep and be on holidays on the beach and it'll just sell itself and you won't have to do any work. I haven't figured out that system yet.
No, I'm so glad you said that. When I took my master's, it was amazing because it was online. It was with Florida State University. They are, very cutting edge in terms of their instructional design programs. And I took it from Vancouver, but the faculty works just as hard in an online course. I mean, maybe not as hard, but pretty close to as hard in an online course as they do in the in-person courses. You still need to show up and be in the discussion threads. You need to be available to answer questions, right? You need to be able to facilitate things and review activities. Like they were busy. And that made for a positive learning experience, as opposed to some of these things where you're just supposed to go through it at your own pace and nobody ever checks in on you and the assessments aren't really there. Because one of the things that I found so rewarding in my own online courses is the creating of community and the opportunity to create like a global community and to connect with people, but create those opportunities for connection. Doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be a live Zoom call, there are lots of ways to connect where people can do it on their own time. But that community feel is like, I've cherished that a lot. And that's been a real unexpected benefit of this. But that comes from that interaction.
I completely agree. Okay. One person is saying this is invaluable. Thank you both. Thank you for being here. Amanda Mckinney is here, and she is a marketing coach for yoga teachers. So excited to be catching this live today.
Cool.
And because Amanda's here, I want to make sure that we ask about, like, how do we get people to show up to our course? We also can't just create it and then be like, there it is. It's on a website somewhere. How do we get people to sign up? How do we market it?
Yeah. Well, and this will definitely be in Amanda's, what do we call that? Bushel area? Wheelhouse. That's the word. I'm like, what is that word? But I do have some suggestions. And one of them is what I just said, which is rather than just put it out there, I think that having a clear start date and a course schedule, like doing that 3 times a year is better than just leaving it out there. People don't just human nature. We're so busy. We're inundated with so many things. Unless it's time sensitive, we're not going to sign up for it. People are just too overwhelmed with the things that feel more urgent. So we need to add a little urgency to our courses and say like, hey, this is the time. This is what's happening. I mean, I've had, I have several online courses out there. Nobody it's like for the regular online courses, sure, I'll get some people, who show up occasionally, but it's the time-bound courses that's what people want to come to. So I think it's better all around. And you can also do things and set up early bird dates and things like that. I mean, you want to market it kind of in advance, depending on how long it is. And so setting up like an early bird, like you get 10% off if you sign up by this date, those kinds of things, of course, work. Keeping it alive on social media, having students post their experience of the course as you go along can help generate kind of an understanding out there of the value of it. Student testimonials are great. So I think it's probably a lot of those marketing, same marketing kind of strategies that we might use to reach our community when we're doing a workshop or anything that's, live as well. And I think marketing always seems like such a scary thing. And sometimes we feel like our online course, oh my gosh, this means I'm competing globally. And I like to tell people like, no, it's like we're still local actors. It's just that our opportunities to shake hands with people has extended into these social media platforms so we can reach our tribe in different avenues. But it's the same thing. It's like creating value, sharing value, and then being consistent in terms of reaching out to your tribe of people.
What I really hear through your message is this huge focus on the students of what they really need. We might be feeling like, I just want to sell my course in my sleep and sit on a beach, but that doesn't really help our students. And so people were just echoing this in the comments. Amanda was saying, yes, a start and finish date helps with marketing so much.
Yeah.
Mary's here and says, I appreciate live courses because I'm able to ask questions in real time and there's accountability there. I fail with self-paced courses. Mary, you're not alone in this at all.
No, that's human nature.
It's so true. Yeah. Amanda's saying, great point. Giving an option for connection is often such a great thing to have in a course. It's true. That's a lot of the time why I've signed up for yoga teacher training is like, oh, I'm back with people who understand what I'm going through here. Yeah.
And I love that. And I think that people will take, depending on the course you're offering, people will take a course because they love the teacher. And so, but one of the things that we love is connecting as humans. And so having that live connection or that one-on-one connection is huge, not with the teacher and then also with other people. I think that's like a huge draw, especially in the era that we're hopefully emerging from, where we've been so separated from people. It's really, it's so good for us. And then we can share like the challenges, like, oh my gosh, that module was so hard, or did you understand that? And then people can help to elevate each other, which is also super fun.
I'm excited to see where this goes. I know Denite saying this is really helpful. Thank you so much, because this really affirms some of the decisions I've made. I happen to know behind the scenes that Denite is working on a course that helps business owners with their messaging. And so I'm excited that Denite and everyone here will be able to take this and create their course out into the world. Here's a great question that I think will be good for wrapping up. Do you suggest getting feedback or buy-in before creating the course? My fear is spending all this time creating and then no one buys.
We all have that fear, Brianne. We all have that fear. Yeah, I totally understand that. I mean, you know what? My habit is just like, I just create it. I'm like, I just have to share this. Blah. And so I do it. But I do think that it is more strategic to get a little bit of that pre-interest. And you can do that simply by, by inquiring around, like, rather than say, I have this idea for the course, is that useful? Because then everyone's going to say yes. Say like, okay, what's really in this arena, what's really challenging to you? And then you can kind of get a feel for what people are looking for, or ask your community, like, these are some areas I'm thinking of sharing more resources on. Where do you resonate? Like, what do you need? So you can get some of that buy-in. You can also do pre-sales for your course, which I know some folks think is really helpful, where you kind of, I would say, create your outline, like or at least get your course objectives done and your big idea. And then you say, okay, I've got this course. I know how I'm going to do it. So you don't feel like you're like, in the spotlight, once you actually have to create it. But like, give yourself a rough map, like do that little bit of that map work, put it out there. You can do pre-sales and then see if people come. I mean, I would say if you're feeling like there's a need, I would trust your instincts. Again, I've created all my courses just because I thought they were a great idea. I was like, people need this. I'm going to create it, and so I think I think it can go either way. I think if you have a strong calling, there's probably something real there. But yeah, sure, do some double checking with your people before maybe you do all of the video work. Like maybe get your map done, ask about it, and then you kind of know before you've invested in creating all the material, which is really the more expensive part of the process.
That's so good. That's really helpful. I think it's Brianne that says, thank you. I love that pre-sale plan and trusting myself. There is a question here that I don't want to forget. So I think I said we were wrapping up, but if you're okay to take a couple more.
Sure, of course.
All right. So one is, how do you manage for copyright issues? So what if you're going to put it out there and then you think, oh my gosh, what if someone takes all of this and steals it?
Well, there are some ways to avoid that. So first of all, two sides to this question. The questions, I just have to say, your questions here have been so good. These are such good questions. Like, we have gone so much more specific and practical than I have in any other talk I've done. So I just want to give like big shout outs to your community. Like, these are excellent questions. So copyright issues. So number one, we want to be in the clear. So that means that if we write it, we own it, right? You can link to other things that are online. You can link to them. I wouldn't necessarily embed them, but and you can reference them. Actually, in university courses that I did, they would link to YouTube stuff, and you just have to reference it. This was retrieved by. You can figure out how to do that if you look up, just how to reference things. It's, it's like doing a footnote, right? I got this from here, and here's where you find it, right? But we always want to have people linking to things so that, like, if it's on YouTube, so that the person who posted that is getting either the advertising dollars or the clicks that they deserve for creating that content. So you can reference things outside of your that are outside of your course as materials, and that's great. And that's useful as long as it really serves the learning objectives of your program. There's so much great stuff out there that it could be useful to have a couple of references like that are helpful. Now, in terms of your own content, if you're posting it into something like Vimeo or YouTube, like, for stealing stuff, if we're talking about videos, YouTube, you can get around, you could probably people could still download those if they really wanted to. Vimeo, I think you might be a little safer because it's a little bit more private, and Vimeo has the white labeling, so you don't get all the YouTube advertisement on it. So when you embed your stuff in there, people won't be able to download those. And you can make your materials downloadable or not in many of these platforms. But at the end of the day, there's so much stuff being created that I don't want you to get hung up on protective strategies. So I was super worried about this. I made my PDFs and I security locked them, and it was like, oh, I'm going to make sure they're secure. It was such a waste of time. I mean, yeah, sure. Maybe that one person in 5,000 who was like, I'm going to steal this PDF, honestly, a lot of it's not worth your time to do unless you have something that's very proprietary, in which case you might take those extra steps. But for most of it, it's like, if people are going to screenshot stuff, they're going to screenshot stuff. Like, we can't prevent that anymore. So you just have to trust in the integrity of what you're offering. Trust your people. Maybe you put a disclaimer. You guys, you say this took me a long time to create, so please don't screenshot it or share your password with someone else, that kind of thing. But if you're within the body of a course too, people are usually going to also be like, I paid for this. I'm not going to share this out there because I bought it, right? So I haven't encountered that problem very much. And at some point, there may be breakage, is what I call it. Like in the restaurant, you just break a glass, right? There may be breakage on your course. Like, somebody might share your handout. That could happen. Just put your copyright on stuff, and know that that's just kind of part of this business that we're in. But it's very rare from what I've seen.
That's so great. Oh, it's a great question and a great answer. Thank you so much for that. And then someone else asked, what do you say to those making courses when all the resources are all free online?
Yeah, I say make your course. So basically it depends. So the reason that I take a course with someone rather than get all the resources online is because I don't know those resources. I don't trust them. And also I have to go out, and then I have to find, and I have to filter, and I have to see if they're okay. And then I have to put it all together myself. The reason I take an online course isn't because the information isn't out there. We can find anything out there. The reason I do it is because it's more efficient and trustworthy. So it's kind of like learning to do it yourself, right? We could learn to do everything ourselves now with all the videos that are out there, but am I going to build my own house? No, I'm going to hire an expert to do it because it's far more efficient and the quality will be better. So what we want to do as providers is be trustworthy, provide high value content that is really effective and helps people to learn, because it comes back to that map again. Here's the map again, but our ability to organize the information, filter out what you don't need, and really provide something of value. That's what people are paying for. And they're paying because they know that they trust us to help them wade through the weeds and give them something that's clear and effective.
This is so good, Rachel. Wow, this has been a packed interview. I'm excited that the replay is here for everyone. How can people work with you further if they want to create a course? Like, what is it that you have out there to help people?
Sure. Well, first of all, you can always hit me up for a free virtual online coffee. I'm happy to connect with folks and just have a chat. It's nice just to build community. And sometimes there's just one little thing you had a question on, and I can help you out with that, and away you go. If you're looking for something a little bit more substantial, I have a course out there called How to Create an Online Course, which goes through a lot of the stuff we've talked about. I provide you with templates and maps and opportunity to connect with me for feedback. And I go more into the weeds on platforms, copyright, tech, strategies, alignment, assessments, the whole deal. So it's basically my brain in a box. So if you're like, I want this and a little bit more of a deeper dive, that could be a useful thing. And I also do coaching one-on-one. So, if you hit me up for a virtual chat and you're like, oh my gosh, I kind of need someone to help coach me through this process just so I'm super clear and efficient, I also do that kind of stuff. So I'm around.
All right. So I'll link to your website when this goes out as a podcast. It's rachelyoga.com. And you're also on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, Rachel Scott Yoga. So I hope that our yoga teachers go and follow you and create amazing courses. Please know, if you're going to create a course, you might be thinking, oh my gosh, someone did a course just like this. Like, no one can. Amanda said it here. No one can teach it like you. And that's also comforting when we're thinking about the stealing. Keep going with it. The night saying, yes, love that answer, and why to create a course when the info is free. It's efficient, trustworthy, and of higher quality. Someone else is Rachel saying, thank you. So grateful for your honest answers. Hugs. I like this so much. Oh, Catherine from Victoria here. Rachel Scott, are you kidding about the free online coffee? I'd love to talk to you all day. I took the trainer course at the Victoria Yoga Conference, and it was excellent. Thank you so much for this interview as well.
Hi,
she
Catherine.
said it right here. Virtual coffee.
Virtual coffee, anytime.
All right. Thank you so much for this today. Is there anything else as you think, okay, these people are off to create their courses? Is there any like closing, go do this pep talk that you have for them?
do it. You can do it. You can do it. And honestly, like, again, these questions were so great. I feel like we got a lot of great information in this, in our session. So go do it. Like if you're feeling that, I think it's so beautiful to be expressive and share that, and people will really resonate with it. So don't hesitate.
Thank you so much for this today, Rachel. It was great.
Thank you, Shannon. Thanks for all you do for the community and all the value you provide. It's awesome.
We'll have you back in September. I'm excited about that. Mark your calendars, everyone, or make sure you're on our email list. Thank you all for being here live with your amazing questions. That's what made today so special. And take care, everyone. Bye.